Ask 10 men and you'll get 10 vague, different, conflicting answers to the question, what is masculinity? This book in my hand is The Way of Men. We have given this to every single podcast guest on the Earn It All podcast so far because of a lot of reasons. One, this is a phenomenal book about masculinity, and I happen to be a man, as does Adam. And I think it's just a great book that talks about a lot of different things, especially as our role as men throughout history. And so this is why everyone who's come on the podcast has gotten a copy of that. And today we have Mr. Jack Donovan himself, the author of The Way of Men and many other books on the podcast. What's up, Jack?
Doing good.
Yeah, what's going on?
Good to be here. Yeah.
I even have your spiffy new safari shirt on, man.
I know.
I like this thing.
Nice.
They don't make them big enough for me yet, so
Oh,
got to get on a 3XL.
Yeah, I think we only have 2XL.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Dude, it's an honor to have you here, man. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I started reading your books. I think it was during COVID when I was doing 75 hard and just looking for books to read. And I don't remember how I even found it, but it might have been even through you on Instagram. I think someone might have tagged you or something. But I picked up The Way of Men, and I went right through all of them, through Fire in the Dark, and I picked up so much out of it. I even took this and read it again on my wife and I, our anniversary. We went up to Flagstaff or something. I was reading it. She's like, what are you reading? So I read some of it out loud. She's a huge fan of this. So
cool.
It's not just for men. I think this is just such an important book for humans in general. And I wanted to dive into, how you came about writing this and now how you're here in our studio in Arizona. This is cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hell yeah. So Mr. Jack Donovan, where are you from?
I'm originally from Pennsylvania.
Where at?
In the middle, near the bottom. It's closer to Maryland. It's York, Pennsylvania, so it's closer to Maryland than anywhere else. So it's I was actually born in Harrisburg, but I grew up in York.
I was born in Scranton.
Okay.
Yeah.
And people don't realize how big Pennsylvania is. Like, I've never been there. That's like way up in one of the other corners. Yeah.
I mean, I think it, like you say, kind of middle bottom, but I don't really know. I left there when I was in preschool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you grew up there, and were you there for a long time, or when did you leave?
I went to school in New York City. When I was 17, I did early admissions to an art school. Yeah. And so I was in New York City at 17 and walking around Manhattan, going to museums, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I was there, in that world in New York for maybe like 2.5 years.
Okay.
And then I came back for a little time in Pennsylvania, and then moved to San Francisco after that. So I've been on the West Coast for, I guess, almost 30 years.
Sure.
So I'm kind of West side of America kind of guy at this point.
Same. Yeah. Every time I go back to the East Coast, like there's some nice stuff back there, but I'm like, West Coast is it for me.
Yeah.
Like this, especially Arizona, specifically Arizona.
Good.
I really like it out here.
Cool.
Yeah. So you said you got into art.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a degree in what?
I don't have a degree in it. I did do like 2.5 years in school. Well, I guess 3.5 by the time I was done. Did a couple different schools.
Okay.
But I actually started out, your questionnaire asked if what do people don't know about you. I actually started out I went to school for fashion design.
Yeah.
Like originally. And which is funny now that I'm making shirts.
Yeah.
Like it's stuff that I'm like, hold on, I know how to make a flat. I can do that. I'm sending them like edits of measurements and things like that.
Right.
But that was my first thing that I wanted to do. But then they wouldn't let me do menswear. And that's what I wanted to do because it's considered like, just you can pick that up at some point. Like women's wear is where it's at, like in that world. And I didn't want to do that at that time. Although I'm glad I didn't do menswear at that age because I would have had terrible ideas.
Yeah.
Because they are not the ideas I would have now.
Sure.
But no, I did that for a while and transferred into a fine art program, and then just never really finished that out.
Yeah.
And then just started life. Like I moved to San Francisco and had basically, I think I've had 37 jobs. Like a lot of little jobs, like a lot of odd jobs. I worked for a French chef. I worked in like a residence hotel in the night shift. I did all kinds of weird stuff, eventually, driving delivery trucks. I've been in PR. I've been like an administrative assistant. I worked in stock boy at Pottery Barn and Crate and Barrel, all kinds of, little jobs. But
interesting. So when did you get the idea that, hey, maybe I'm going to start to like write a book?
Well, I started blogging at first. Yeah. I always think it's funny because, you get resistant to new things when they come out.
Yeah.
And I was like, blogging is stupid. Like, who wants to hear what you have to say about every little thing? Yeah, I remember when blogs came out. Like, this is dumb. Like Live Journal, you're reading that, and then I guess that became my entire life and my career.
So I do it full time now.
Yeah. So I mean, nobody actually blogs anymore. I guess it's they do.
I do.
Adam does.
Yeah, like Substack or something like that. That's
I've had my own blog website that I built on WordPress since 2017.
Yeah,
and I've made $4.47 as of
nice.
today.
Congratulations, man.
I'm about to put a course out. Let me show you how to make money online.
Nice. Yeah, no, I have mine is still in WordPress, and I've had it like probably since 2009 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's probably janky in the background. Like, I've done all the designs myself. So I'm sure the code's a mess. But
mine's just one single scrollable thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had to update it so many times because they look old after 3 years, but yeah. So man, how we get there? Blogging. Oh yeah. So I was doing blogging at a time, and some of the stuff I was writing, one of my friends was like, hey, can you turn this into a book? We had a publishing company at that time, and that was my first book, which I really don't talk about. Like, it was just my, first time.
Yeah.
It was my first time.
Yeah.
And then so one of the criticisms of that book was that I was talking positively about masculinity. And that was something that I started to do later in life. I mean, that was in my 30s because I went to school for fashion design. I was an artist and whatever. And I thought masculinity is dumb. Like, it's over.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that people were seeing in the last 10 years with the way they deconstruct gender and all those kind of things. I mean, they were doing that. I went to my school was a division of the New School for Social Research. And so they were doing cultural studies programs and like gender studies programs like in the 90s. And so I was seeing all that and getting all that information then. And so I kind of knew about all that stuff that was happening. So I had that perspective that I didn't think a lot of people didn't up until like all of a sudden that blew up in like, like the 2010s, it became a big thing. But I was like, oh no, this is coming and it's worse than you think, and so I had a lot of experience with that. And I guess that gave me a different perspective. So when I started writing about masculinity in a positive way, because I did a bunch of reading that I had done when I was in high school or junior high school or whatever, like Jack London and things like that. And when I was a kid, I was like trying to go to the big city and become like a big deal and whatever. And I was like, this is boring and dumb. And then I went back to some of that material, especially the book, The Sea Wolf by Jack London. And it's a great book because it's about a very civilized man who gets put in a very uncivilized situation. Like, he's basically this well-to-do gentleman type who, basically gets, falls off a boat, or I forget how he gets in the water, but he gets picked up by a ship. And they're like, yeah, we're not turning around. You work for us now. So he basically got taken out to sea with these hard men who were like, okay, well, and he watched crew members die, and they were like, well, throw them overboard,
Before it starts to stink.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this very harsh reality of what life actually is if you aren't in a privileged situation. Yeah. And there's great speeches by the main character, Wolf Larson, in it that are very, life just cares about itself. Life is just yeast and ferment. All these these great speeches about they're just realizing that you're not special. Sure. It's that kind of whole speech then, and that kind of changed my perspective. And then I went back and looked at a lot of things, and I looked at a lot of the things that I said about masculinity when I was a young kid, hearing the things that you hear and whatever. Like, I'm like, well, I think it was wrong. I think I saw something that, I'd missed things, and I'm like, there's something positive here. And then I realized that there was something that I thought was beautiful that was dying. And so that was kind of how I connected with it. And so I started to write positively about masculinity, but the early criticisms of my writing were that I didn't define masculinity very well. And then, as you read on the back cover, that, well, no one really does.
Yeah.
And so when you talk to men about masculinity, what they say is like, you'll get quotes from movies and like my grandfather said, or, like, well, you'll know it when you see it. And that's true. But I knew coming from the background that I came from, that I'm like, well, if you can't articulate that, they're going to bury you because they've thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
All these gender studies people and all these, they've thought about it a lot. And so I realized that men need to be able to articulate what masculinity is and what is good about it and why they care about it and what it is, because otherwise they're just going to be made to look like fools. Like they can be right, because you can be right and be made to look like a fool.
Yeah.
And so, I wanted to give them some tools to really try to articulate that. So that was really what the Way of Men was. Like, well, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
And so at the time I was, driving delivery trucks, and, because after I started talking about masculinity, I'm like, I guess I should get a blue collar job and do some stuff. So I did, and so I delivered exercise equipment for a few years, and that was a really good learning experience for me in a lot of ways. I mean, carrying treadmills upstairs like all day long with another dude. Yeah. And you can't mess up. I mean, anything, you guys have just both done military things. There's things where you can't mess up.
Right.
It's not like, oops, sorry. It's like, well, if that goes down the stairs on that guy, he's going to the hospital.
Yeah.
So like you just don't screw up.
Totally.
And that learning those kind of lessons myself, like later in life, kind of informed my whole process for, talking about masculinity. And then I was obviously doing a lot of research and reading in evolutionary psychology. And that was, it was after the time when Steven Pinker's The Blank Slate came out. And before that, for many, many years, there was this idea that, masculinity wasn't real and that human nature wasn't real. And it was all just this thing that was made up of a social construct. And Steven Pinker, who's, has a little bit of TDS, and he's not the best right now. But like at the time when he put out Blank Slate, he just skewered everybody in the establishment. He's like, no, human nature is real. This is reproducible. Like these are patterns that happen over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that was really foundational for my understanding of, well, what makes us different? What are men? What are humans?
Right.
And so it's just, that's a very foundational book for me.
You said something fascinating there that when it was in the 90s, I think you said in San Fran, like you saw this happening. So how long do you think this has been going on? Because was that the start of it, or has this been something like specifically like getting ready to like openly attack masculinity? Because, we've been seeing it like firsthand for a while now, for a decade or more.
Yeah.
But they've, like you said, they've been thinking about this and planning this for a while. So like when do you think it started?
Oh, I mean, it's really, and I didn't know this then when I wrote that book, but like now, I read James Lindsay's stuff, and the way he talks about Gnostic Marxism and the way that it starts out with Marxism, and that's kind of everything flows from that.
Sure.
And there's like, let's take these things apart in society, and it doesn't matter. It's all these hegemonic roles, and let's destroy them.
Right.
But obviously, the attack on masculinity, that started, really seriously in the 60s.
Yeah.
And the 60s and obviously 70s. And there were books. I have one book. I threw up most of my feminist research because I'm like, I don't need to have these books anymore. I did this. I did that job. I don't need to have these around. But there's one, I believe it's called The 49% Majority. And it's basically like, I thought it was like the foundational text really for all the arguments that they were ever going to make after that. Because it had some guys who later, who later became like men's rights activists actually were writing in it, but they were all feminists at the time.
Yeah.
And, but it was a lot of, actual feminists and so forth. And for a long time, a lot of male feminists just get thrown under the bus eventually. They all get Me Too'd.
Mm-hmm.
So like the guys who I was writing about in The Way of Men have already been disappeared.
Sure.
Like they already got Me Too'd, but like at the time, there was a guy named Michael Kimmel who he was the guy who the New York Times would go to talk about masculinity. And so he was the guy, and he was basically the feminist expert on masculinity. And he had his whole agenda, and really everything that he would say came from that book that was like from 1970 or 1974 or something. So they've been talking about this for years, and it was obviously part of feminism. Like, hey, men and women aren't that different was the idea, and they used a lot of bad research to suggest that, but it kind of had a life of its own.
Yeah.
And so we're living in the world that they created, even though a lot of it was created on lies.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's what birthed the third wave, quote unquote, feminism thing was that. And then, I wanted to ask you about this too. During all that time, we see that the whole culture shift, and it's not just it's not just in one place in like San Francisco or wherever. It was like movies and TV, and like you see on all these movies and TV shows came out where the dad was a fucking bumbling buffoon idiot, and it's like the matriarch was the whatever, and all of that stuff kind of started piling on top of each other. And it's interesting that you said like in the night, no, this was happening in the 90s, and it's going to get a lot worse.
It's way before.
It's going to get way worse, guys.
When people bring up they always ask me like, what do you think of toxic masculinity? I'm like, hey, well, that's made up bullshit. But like it's, they had another word for it. This is just a new iteration of it.
Yeah.
Like in the 70s, like Alan Alda was the sensitive man. He was supposed to be like the representative, and he would say things like testosterone poisoning, and that's what they called it back then. And so they just changed the name to toxic masculinity.
Sure.
But it's for the same thing, and it always means whatever a feminist thinks is bad.
Fuck yeah, I'm gonna start putting that on my stuff.
Testosterone poisoning. Suffering from testosterone poisoning survivor.
Yeah, survivor. Yeah.
So if you're not on TRT, you're a Marxist.
More or less.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened to Batista.
Yeah. Well, it seems like everything kind of goes back to it's crazy how you said Marxism, because like kind of everything goes back to that.
Yeah.
Like, and it's very interesting because I was like, okay, in the beginning, were they trying to really go after like equality or something, or now that I'm thinking about it, like, no, they just trying to dismantle what was there for their own version of whatever they want a society to be. And they had to take down men and take down a lot of other things.
Yeah. I mean, even the earliest like the pre-19th Amendment, like feminist stuff comes from like they were anarchists and socialists and whatever at that time. So it's hard to imagine what, if you went back, had a time machine, like girls want a time machine to go visit grandma, guys, the meme or whatever, guys, go back and get Marx. Like if you pull him out of the picture, what happens? I mean, did some, obviously ideas sometimes just come up.
Sure.
They just happen. But, how would that have changed things? Because like people criticize, because America is a very liberal idea. And there's a lot of critiques of like liberalism and classical liberalism there, which is very American. Like not having a king is a liberal idea. And to the point where like I hate giving liberals the word liberal. Like I mean, like it's, if you really think about it, like liberty, I want to be free. So they always say that it had to come to this point, like liberalism had to come here. And I don't know if that's true. I mean, like if you pulled the Marxist piece out of it, would that have happened?
Right.
Could you have a free society that maybe we don't make all the same bad decisions that, got us to where we are right now? And we don't know. I mean, that's just, like a game that you could play. But I think just a lot of it comes down to Marxism and that kind of mind virus, which I think flows in many ways from what I talked about in some of my other books, which is resentment. This kind of jealousy, because it's all class anger and this jealousy that I want to hurt this person that has more than me. Is kind of at the root of all of this.
I think we have a pretty good idea of what would happen if we took Marxism out. We have plenty of examples of of these empires that lasted thousands of years, and the only ones that what is it, the 300-year rule or whatever now? It's like a modern 250.
I think is what it comes down.
So it's like a modern empire can only last for 250 years, and it's because of ideas like that.
Yeah,
it's because that they get subverted from within. And I talked about this on our last podcast that we had, was Yuri Bezmenov, when he talked about how our Marxism and communistic ideas are going to subvert the United States. And he told us in 1984 how they were going to do it.
Yeah.
And all of those things have now happened. And it's like, oh, well, we do know what would happen if we took that Marxist thing and went and threw it in the trash.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't be where we are now. We'd probably be in an extension of 1953, like, or post World War II type of era, right?
Yeah.
That is an interesting thing to think about. Yeah. I think it's fascinating that they attack. I think masculinity is possibly the most important aspect of a safe and protected society, and they attack that. You know, because you think about how any country, how any perimeter has ever been established, it's been by men. It's been by, like you say in your books, it's like it's establishing a perimeter, protecting it, expanding it, you know, and now you can build from there. Without that, you don't have anything.
Yeah.
You know, but it's very interesting that like the feminists like fight against what essentially keeps them safe. Fight against what allows them to go out there and scream about whatever they want, you know, because without men to protect them, like, and some other men are going to come over here, you know, and just take them and take whatever they want. So it's really a backwards way. I don't even know what they're trying to accomplish other than just kind of like get back to Marxism. And they need the strong men out of the way, and they need to have their ideology be more important than things that are more logical, like safety and security and, you know, logic and stuff like that.
Yeah. You know, I mean, they're very protected. Yeah. They don't always know that they're protected. Right. Like, yeah, they just are. Totally. And so they have that's their perspective that they have. Like, like nothing bad has ever happened to me. That's why I can go up to a large man and scream at him and say whatever I want.
Slap him in the
because
face.
Because there's violence. There's potential violence everywhere protecting her for those things. But I mean, they're really pawns of this bigger thing. You know, like the Marxism works for oligarchs. You know, like no one actually gets the Marxism at the end.
Right.
You get the correct. Like when I was in Poland, we went to this theme restaurant, and it was a theme restaurant from all the dishes were different. I guess, you know, Soviet or whatever, like communist, like higher ups. And all the fancy dinners that they would have while the people were starving. Mm-hmm. And so the whole theme of the restaurant was like, order these things that like all the high communist like officials were eating while all the poor people were starving. And that's kind of how it works. That's always how Marxism ends up. Mm-hmm. People think it's about power to the people, but it's not. Like, you get to work and then we're going to go sit in an office and like, you know, enjoy the finer things. I've been to a couple of restaurants that are themed like that over the years. It's kind of fun. There used to be one in Las Vegas.
It sounds kind of neat.
Yeah. There was one in Las Vegas. The first place I ever had steak tartare was called Red Square. And
dude,
have you ever been there?
Red Square.
Yeah. They used to have all the vodka in the case, and they had the head of Stalin or something like that inside one of the
Red Square
cases.
was a Vegas staple.
I love that place.
Yeah. So you mentioned we were talking beforehand. You went to Germany and you just talked about having these kind of cool meals and stuff. You've done a good amount of traveling to speak and learn about all sorts of different cultures and stuff like that to write your book, which is one of the things that brought me really deeper into like, okay, I want to try to understand what this guy understands because he's gone out there and experienced things that I never will. Yeah. And I think that's what's so neat about it, because I think most people, I mean, a lot of people that write books, they you know, sit at their computer and they research and they just, you know, they write a book and that's what they do. But you kind of went out and got immersed in a lot of different things and talked to a lot of people, saw a lot of different cultures. And we were talking about, I mean, everywhere, Poland, Germany, like you've been traveling around the planet doing this, right?
A couple. I mean, obviously I wrote The Way of Men before all that. I was literally probably making $12.50 an hour as a delivery guy when I wrote the book, but
no kidding.
And so that was a lot of reading books and a lot of talking to people, but also like living life and learning when I was wrong. Yeah. You know, having to go out and do hard work every day. We always, a friend of mine jokes, you have all these people who do these different, like, you have to do something hard. And a lot of people do, but he's like, I worked in a copper mine. Right. He's like, I worked in a copper mine, like where my clothes were frozen to my body. Yeah. Like I got it. I don't need to do something hard for
cold
fun.
water. This
exactly.
We are at the pinnacle of fucking society, because we're like at this point where we have to seek out and pay for hardship.
Yeah.
It's like people are paying to do hard stuff, and it's like, fuck, man, we have it pretty damn good right now. And Stefan Arnio talks about this 80-year cycle where it's like the 80-year cycle of strong men turning, you know, good times into bad times, blah, 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 the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody knows the saying, but if you go and look at that, it's like we're right at the tip of the end of the 80-year cycle. And it's like, I'm wondering what the the dropping off point's going to be, because eventually strong men are going to have to force good times again through violence, because every single time that's happened.
Right.
And it's like, I'm just like, where is the tipping point for that? And like,
I mean, we'll see. I hate to rely on cyclical models of history.
Sure.
Because then they become self-fulfilling prophecies. Sure. Like you feel like this has to happen. Or there's so many people who are like, we're living in a fallen age. We live in the Kali Yuga or whatever. And I was around those people for years and years. But like, okay, what was World War I and World War II? And like, what was the Civil War? And what, like those people probably thought it was pretty crappy, and so it's a lot of perspective involved. So I don't like to always go to that. I mean, it's a possibility and it feels that way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, other things could happen. And we have so many variables that are not historically consistent.
Sure.
Like right now, I mean,
that's a good point.
Like AI, like drones, like we have things that they didn't have to deal with before. And so like there's all kinds of different variables in the mix. So we're not guaranteed anything. And I think we just have to play it as it lays. I mean, obviously, we have this little election coming up, and things could go one of two ways. And if one way is pretty bad, like in a very big way. And there's a lot of people I don't think after 2020 you can really just be like, well, it really doesn't matter, and that honestly, for most of my life, that's the way it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember everything was pretty much the same, no matter who was in office or whatever. 9/11 was huge. I was already a man when 9/11 happened. Like I was living in San Francisco in an apartment, whatever. Like, oh, okay, that was a big paradigm shift. Yeah. Like that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And then really the next one was 2020.
Yeah.
Like there was a period of basically nothing, and so, yeah, we've had, these very few gigantic paradigm shifting things. And but after 2020, I don't know how you could think that it doesn't matter. It'll be the same.
No, we're there. We're there again. Cause I believe that in 2020, Trump was the first real election that we've had in our lifetimes.
Right.
Because like you said, it didn't matter before. We had a Bush or we had a Clinton or basically forever.
Yeah.
Then Obama just came. It was all kind of the same people. It didn't even matter. Even with Carter and Reagan, it was all just kind of like, whatever. There's a Republican in today, Democrat tomorrow. We're still doing our thing.
Yeah.
Trump was the first completely outside the system guy that came in. Yeah. And I think that's why they've been literally trying to kill him.
Yeah.
They're just like, no, this is not part of the plan.
Yeah.
And I think more and more people are waking up to that now, especially with this election. Now that we have like a lot of Democrats, think of all these people that are on basically the Donald Trump team now that are all former Democrats.
Yeah.
Trump, Gabbard, RFK, Musk.
Yeah.
Like they're all like, no, the whole thing is screwed. Yeah. And this is a completely new thing. So I think there's more people like realizing also that like, sound like Alex Jones here a little bit, but like the global thing is a real thing. Like I think a lot of people, they don't realize like all the shit that's happening in like UK and France right now with their real censorship, throwing people in jail literally just for talking, not doing anything, literally just saying words. Yeah. That shit is coming here if she wins.
Yeah.
For sure, because she won't stop it. And it's not like she's like trying to do it. That's just the machine. She doesn't know what's going on. That's what the world is doing. She has no clue what's happening.
Her dad's a literal Marxist too.
Yeah. Right. I mean, she's just there to like sign papers and read the teleprompter.
Yeah. Just like Joe.
Yeah, exactly. And so like it always makes me mad when people are like, well, she's gonna do that. She's not gonna she's gonna do exactly what she's told.
You can
that's her main job qualification. Is doing exactly what she's told in many ways.
That's right.
But I mean, that's the stuff that I'm looking at too. I mean, things that were stressing me out were when they pulled the Telegram guy off a plane in Paris, in France.
Yeah.
I'm like, when you can pull billionaires off planes and just make up crimes and like whatever, that's a bad scene.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's, and people were like, well, billionaires, who cares? But that's a big deal. I mean,
he's supposed to be part of the club.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be, you're a billionaire. Like you could,
I believe I just pulled up X right now. Tommy Robinson did go to prison today, from what I can see. Over in the UK.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
Didn't do anything.
Yeah,
literally was like a reporter.
He's been on the list for a long time, but his whole career. But
But that's what I'm hoping people are realizing. Like, it's not Donald Trump versus Harris.
Right.
It's like Trump representing basically not the government.
Yeah.
And Harris is this humongous government where it has not mattered for many decades who the president was, because there's just systems in place that they're going to do what it's going to do. And she's just going to be like a Biden and just, cool, I'm here. I'll say what you need me to say. I'll sign orders and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's really the contrast. It's not just who's going to do a better job. Like, it's not that at all.
No.
She's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
She's going to be told she's going to do what she's told to do.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know, I remember having an argument with a friend who's a liberal who has said when Trump was in office last time that he just, you know, he had TDS, and he was saying like, he's just dumb, he's stupid, and I'm like, and at the time I was like, you can't be stupid and actually go through that day.
Yeah.
You're like, whatever that person does in that day, you have to be operating at a fairly high level just to make it through.
Right.
Like, you can't just be like, ooh, you know, like, but I was clearly wrong. like, you know, like, I was wrong. They have enough handlers that they will just push you through the day. I just assumed that you were hearing some high level information and having to process at a pretty high speed. But
I think probably it used to be like that, because even Joe
Oh,
Biden was intelligent. He was. He was very. If you listen to him talk, way back. I mean, he's fucking been in government for 50 years.
Yeah, he's a company man, but he was intelligent.
He's intelligent. He's a company man, but you know, he's got his wits about him, or he did. You know.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're absolutely right. You can't. You're there. But the argument, you would never win that argument because it doesn't matter. They'd just come up with something else. Well, I just don't like him. He's a misogynist, or he's a racist, or he's a whatever. And it's like, I'm never going to win this argument because you don't want to logically look at this. Right. Like, you know, and that's, I got no argument with a guy because of that too.
You know, so much of it, unfortunately, it's a form of identity. Like they've had their identity is invested in being a part of that particular party. And what's really weird, and what this is really going to decide, and maybe we went too far in a sidebar, I don't know. But what this is really going to decide is like the version of what the parties were supposed to mean that I grew up with has flipped. But you have all these people who are like my age and older, and a little younger, who still believe the hype. I mean, because honestly, if there was a reporter actually questioning something that the government was doing, it was probably a Democrat. Mm-hmm. Like in the like 80s, for like whatever. I mean, it was those are the people who are like, the government's doing something it shouldn't be doing. Right. You know, and now that is not the case at all. Mm-hmm. They won't question anything that they do, and they will like, well, see, the facts from the report from the government say that they are not doing anything wrong. And the same is true across the board. Like all the, this idea that they also used to be the free speech people. Mm-hmm. That's not the case. So all the values that used to be associated with, and that's why you have, it's cool that like, Kennedy jumped in there because he kind of exposed that. And really, I watched one or two of the speeches that he actually gave, and I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. But a lot of people just can't see that. And their whole life, they've had the identity of being a Democrat. So they have to, like, they're invested in that. And actually the information almost doesn't matter. Yep. And so it really takes someone who's actually paying attention to like, be like, okay, they're not doing any of those things anymore, Mm-hmm. And, because I mean, I was a Democrat, like when I was my teens and like 20s and whatever, like what do they say? Like a young man doesn't have a heart.
I don't remember what the saying is.
Yeah. The conservative,
it's good, though,
doesn't have a brain if he's older, but yeah.
Well, Alex Jones was a Democrat before, I think. I think he had
the same age. It's just a weird thing to me. Like he's, I knew someone who had dinner with him, and I was like, I've never been jealous of a dinner date before. Yeah, I mean, because that's a good time,
dude. Oh, man, we talked about that before. Like, if we had a chance to just like get drunk with somebody, it'd be Alex Jones. Yeah, yes. Like, are you kidding me? Like, we'll get a bottle of bourbon and some cigars, and we'll just see what happens.
Interdimensional pedophile Satanist.
Maybe I'd take mushrooms. I think that'd be good. Because I would just sit and giggle the entire time. Be like, what are you doing? All right, cool.
Oh, it'd be a total blast.
Yeah,
it'd be a total blast. Yeah, and it kind of ties right back to masculinity, I think, where it's kind of interesting that it is an election, but it's not because of the election. I just feel like we're at that inflection point right now where it's like, are we going to say that men are men or not? Are we going to say that women can be men and men can be women? Are we really going to go down that path?
Mhm.
Or are we going to plant our flag and be like, no, we're actually the ones that are going to talk about quote unquote science here. You know, like
Yeah.
we know what a man is, we know what a woman is, and it's not what the left is saying. And I feel like we're kind of like at that point, like, well, what are we going to do? Because it's so absurd. I don't know how long we can exist with one side saying that can be true and the other side saying, what the fuck are you talking about? It's not like,
Right.
like something has to, I don't know.
Well,
It's kind of a weird spot in history.
there was a pushback when they went for the kids. There was enough of a pushback that there wasn't before. Because I mean, I remember when whatever Kris Jenner, whatever that whole situation happened. The orthodoxy was so hard on that we're doing this now.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't want any of that smoke.
Yeah.
I'm not that I know what that the argument will be towards me about that. I'm
Right.
not, I don't want that.
I'm not playing with that.
Yeah. But unfortunately, because it's tragic, but the transitioning kids and stuff like once you actually look at it and see what's happening, it's very bad.
It's very bad.
It's monstrous.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that more and more people are seeing that. And even like other government, even the governments that are locking people up for saying words of different kind
right.
are real. Like in England, they're not doing that as much anymore. And people are kind of backing away from like, okay, well, that's too far. But all that comes from that ideology of like, we have to break male and female because it's a binary system that we have to destroy, because this kind of religion where we have to destroy everything, and somewhere magic happens and everything is wonderful after we destroy everything, which is not the way that actually anything is created. But that's the way their mindset works.
We're also,
I was just trying to, just really fast. I was just going to say, I was trying to find the article. I thought I had saved it, but apparently they did a study to try to prove that like transitioning kids was a good thing. And it was good. For them. And it was the complete opposite. And they fucking buried it. It's like a $10 million study.
Yeah.
And they were like, do not let this out.
Yeah.
How messed up is that?
Yeah.
Because it's like, dude, that's quote unquote science. They always call about science.
Yeah.
Dude, there's real data there showing that this is literally ruining kids.
Yeah.
Not just adults who want to make decisions that ruin their bodies or whatever. We're talking about kids.
Yeah.
And they decided to bury it so it wouldn't come out.
Yeah.
I feel like that, like to your point, like, I think that's kind of where this has to keep building from, because it's like we have to protect the most vulnerable and the young kids who, I mean, you can't even get a tattoo till you're 18.
Right.
But you should not be able to do anything like that. It's insane.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, like I remember one year there's a picture of me, I was probably 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a witch that year. And like, I didn't know any different. I wanted to be a witch. My parents got me the most masculine, scary witch costume that they could find.
Yeah.
And the next year was a rhinoceros. It didn't really matter.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
It's just like,
we got to find that picture.
You saw something on TV. It was just like a little plastic mask, whatever.
Right.
I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And so but now they would take that kid and like start him down the path.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, they're just kids. They're just trying to figure stuff out. They don't know things. They're just like, oh, I saw a thing. It interests me.
Yeah.
And they're just processing information.
We're also looking at another, like an underlying issue too of just, and it's not a on purpose attack, maybe, whatever.
Yeah.
If you want to go to fucking Alex Jones on this, but there's also an underlying issue of girls are going through puberty sooner.
Right.
And boys are going through puberty later, if they even do.
Right.
Like we're seeing right now, boys who are 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and they still haven't got their pubescent like hormone spikes, and they still, so they're like, all of a sudden now you're a man, you're 18 years old, and you're like, haven't even gone through fucking puberty yet. And it's a big issue. I've been reading up on this a lot. Yeah. And so this, especially like 100 years ago, your testosterone, if we follow the chart, right? 100 years ago, when you were 14, 15, 16, your testosterone spiked to almost 4,000 nanograms per deciliter during puberty. It then leveled off around 1,200 to 2,000 until you're 25. And it stayed that wherever it was when you were 25, when your brain stopped developing, that's where it stayed until you were 45.
Right.
And then when you're 45, it drops off 1%, 1% per year until you're dead.
Yeah.
So that means a 90-year-old dude would have a 500 nanogram per deciliter testosterone level.
Right.
If, in a perfect world, right?
Yeah.
So now we're seeing the boys, 14, 15, 16, they're not even getting a spike to 600.
Right.
Like the spike is 500, 600. They're leveling off at 300, 400.
Yeah.
So it's like we're literally a third of the men that we used to be when we're 18 years old. And so when you add that issue and you layer on that issue with, the fact that people want to fucking transition kids and all that, where it's like when you ask the 14, 15, 16-year-old boy who hasn't gone through puberty yet that still wants to be a fucking a witch.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, you must be a girl. Fucking pump the shit in you. And then they never get the puberty spike.
They sterilize them for life.
Yeah. And it's like, there's this whole underlying issue on the back end that RFK is talking about it, but nobody else is fucking talking about it. It's like, why is that not, being looked at too? And it's like, it's wild to me that, all of these things are lining up to where if we keep going down the road that we're going, in 100 years, we're going to be a genderless, amalgamous, fucking like gray fucking alien, basically.
Yeah.
Like with our brain jacked into AI. And Elon's going to be on Mars going, fuck, I'm glad we left.
I like your story that Elon's still alive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Elon took the 80,000 people and they went to Mars and they're all happy.
He'll find a way to live.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, he's like what the character from like Prometheus. More or less.
It's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
He's going to make Neuralink is going to make fucking testosterone, like make you go through puberty. Like.
But I mean, the thing that is the big struggle kind of about what you're saying is that there's certain things you do if you want your society to be successful and prosperous and healthy. And we're like, well, none of that makes sense if you want your society to be successful and healthy, right?
Sure.
But we know in 2020 that they actually don't care about that. And that's not really what they're trying to do. Now, there are some people who do want to, and obviously like that's your RFKs, all that stuff, but unfortunately the plan seems to be managed decline for everybody else. Like we will have filtered water in our gated community,
sure.
and you will not. And like you'll have like there was one movie years ago called Elysium. And I think it was supposed to be an argument about healthcare, but it came off a little different.
It definitely did.
It came off of like, this is exactly what they're doing.
Yep, this is going to happen.
We're, the rich people are going to live in the magic place, and then all the other people, dirty people, are going to be like fighting over resources and just like very controlled. Very that movie was a little prophetic in a lot of ways.
We have pods that cure any disease, and we're going to let you all die on Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
That brings up there's a quote from Becoming Barbarian that I really like, and I would like to get your 2 cents on it, because I mean you said it obviously. Sure. And it's men everywhere. I think you said it. Like men everywhere yearn for the collapse of this current mode of civilization, that an inevitable consequence of its design must devalue and emasculate them. Apocalyptic fantasies are a particularly male preoccupation. More and more men are focusing on survivalism and preparedness to give themselves a sense of purpose in a world that doesn't need or want them to be strong, courageous, or prepared for anything. And I think that's a perfect quote to follow up what we were just talking about, where it's like, how long ago did you write that, and how much worse is it now?
Well, I think it's 2016.
Yeah,
I think is when that book came out, and like obviously that was before 2020, and also there's a thing that there's a lot of guys who then go right down that rabbit hole and they want to focus on like this Mad Max scenario.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is how it's going to be. And I'm like, it actually could be much worse and not as exciting. That's what I'm much more concerned about. I'm much more concerned about the cultural revolution happening than like Mad Max, because then it's like just throw everything up in the air and see what happens.
Yeah.
Like Mad Max sounds fun for a lot of guys.
Fun.
That would be cool. I mean, a lot of people would die, it would be crazy, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, it sounds like it's a masculine fantasy.
Yeah.
The reality is, you could be looking at like a tightly controlled police state, which is not very fun at all. And it can go that way too. So, there's so many guys that have this fantasy. I like to troll them a little bit because there's this fantasy that dudes are going to go out and hunt in the woods. Like, oh, well, I'll just retreat to the wilderness and I can hunt elk with all the other guys who are going to go out and hunt elk.
Yeah.
On the king's land.
Right.
Because the BLM land, the government owns that. They don't have to let you go on it.
Yeah.
Like, do they hunt in China? Like, it's not. I'm like, that's not a real scenario.
Well, they do hunt in China. They hunt the Uyghur Muslims in China.
Probably, yeah. But yeah, it's like you don't get to do those things. That. They're not just. That's an idea. That's like a fantasy. That's not.
Yeah.
That's not gonna happen.
That's assuming that the cultural decay doesn't happen in the way that it's happening. That's assuming that, I don't know in what situation that would even be a thing. Maybe if a bunch of nukes went off, maybe.
Yeah. It would have to be a sudden, just complete emergency, panic, chaotic type thing. Because otherwise it's going to be a long, slow burn. It's going to be boring as hell. We're just going to get censored to death and just have people thrown in jail for talking. And it'll just kind of like, it'll suck.
Yeah,
we'll never get the max.
We're never going to get there. Yeah.
We'll never have that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's important to steer dudes away from that fantasy a little bit and steer them to what is actually happening. Because if you live in that escapist world where because there's so many guys that are like so prepared for that to happen. They're like, okay, so here's what's going to happen. You're like, even when dudes with their houses, they're like, well, I have my house like tricked out so that like when it goes down, I'm like, what about the kind of collapse where you can't pay your mortgage and they take your house away? That's because that's kind of how it happens.
Yeah, the IRS will be the last. They're not just going to come door to door. I
mean, that could happen, but in reality, maybe your money is just not worth anything and you can't live there anymore.
That's a great point. Because we at my house we have we have an evacuation plan. We have a lot of weapons. We have water and we have all the things. But it's like there's a very small percentage that is ever going to be used in that way.
Right.
But if it's there, it's kind of fun to plan and we have it and I'd like to practice shooting and
it's the man job. You have to think that way.
I have to have that check mark that I know if shit hits the fan like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at least we have a plan and we'll just see what happens.
Right.
Yeah. But it's not going to play out even nearly as fun.
Things like that assume a level of freedom.
Yeah.
Like you're assuming a level of, now I can just go and do this. And it's like, no, police state.
Yeah.
Like also there's,
drones
and fucking AI robots and
autonomous drones.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. That's like it's so much scarier. Like once you've seen those videos coming out of Ukraine and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's not cool.
And then you see the what's that
like a war without honor or humanity. That's kind of that.
What's the company that's making the dog drones? It's what's that company called?
I don't know, but those
Boston Dynamics or whatever. And it's like that's the video. That video was out like 10 years ago. Can you imagine what they fucking have now?
Yeah.
Like they probably have a dog that looks like a dog.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's your dog.
It's your dog. Yeah. I mean, they already have the pigeons.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a baby pigeon?
The birds. They're birds.
They change the batteries at night.
Jack, I want to go back to your book real quick and ask you something, because this essentially talks about men's role throughout history,
right?
And I've loved that. So just a couple of years ago, I'm not gonna lie, I was starting to get a little worried about men's role in society, like just the way it was going. We've talked about all the different things, the attack on masculinity, the gender fluid stuff that's happening, and just like you said, when that first started, it was like, don't you dare make a comment against it, because we will just end you and your business and your reputation and everything. So for a little bit I was like, dude, is this really freaking going down like this? But right now, at least me, I'm curious if you feel the same way or what your thoughts are. I'm feeling more like, no, we're fucking okay, like, because I feel like logic is coming back, and I feel like you can, especially with the Tate's back online, like you can say words you haven't been able to say again in a long time. And it's just, to me, it's just kind of like, we're not out of the woods, but I feel like, I think we can actually beat down the insanity and bring logic back, I think. But what do you think?
I think there's a window. And it's one of those things that I've just barely, the last few weeks have allowed myself to consider.
Yeah, it's the same. This is, this is a
because
new thing for me.
Because it was looking bad.
Yeah,
it was looking like, what countries should I move to?
Mm-hmm.
It was not looking good, but because a lot of that is because of X right now. And they're trying to bring that down really hard.
Yeah.
And if now it's gotten to the point where if people aren't on X and they aren't like seeing what's coming through there, I'm like, do you watch the news or something? Like, where are you getting information from? Because that's the only place where that's the only place where unfiltered information is coming through.
Yeah.
And you have to filter it because a lot of it is bullshit. But there is, at least it's unfiltered information.
Yeah.
but the rest of it, do you just go to the Circle K and pick up the newspaper and read that? Like, is that like real? Like for you? Like, so yeah, I mean, as long as that's why free speech is so important. And because these things, we've all seen the Frankenstein pictures of what they do to people with the surgeries and things, like we wouldn't see that.
Right.
Like normal people haven't seen that. Like my mom doesn't know what that looks like.
Right.
A lot of normal people don't see that information. So if you don't have those channels open, you're not going to see it. But if they stay open, yeah, I think there's a really good chance that people are starting to see, okay, no. This is crazy. Yeah. This isn't working out. When we can say bad words again, like that's, and just act like adults, we can actually say like, I'm going to say something that's might hurt your feelings.
Right.
That's what needs to happen for society to have disputes and work things out and for us to see like accurate information. And as long as we can do that, I do think there's a window. And like I said, it's mainly because of X right now, because I mean, when it was Twitter, I didn't even get on Twitter until Elon bought it, because I would have been, there was a time probably about 2017 where I would have been definitely canceled off Twitter. And now not so much, but like, I mean, even just me now, but around that time when I was being targeted by a lot of people, that I would have been out. On Twitter, so I didn't even bother with it.
There's a little thing that anyone can do now is go on X, even if you've never been there, make an account and go in and make a comment that you think is like maybe a little too far. Like be mean to somebody. Yeah. Go say it and you'll see it'll post and nothing will happen. Go try to do the exact same comment on Instagram. It won't even post until you say, hey, are you sure? Because comments like this have been reported. I get it all the time. And when I see that, I'm just like, you know what? I'm just like not having fun anymore on Instagram. Like I like being able to really just be an adult on X. Yeah. Like Instagram and Facebook are kind of like being in like kindergarten, and you've got the teacher there to like, you can't say that, Jack. But you go on X and it's like, yeah, I could say something and people might cancel me for it, but I can still say it. Yeah. And it's a huge contrast between when someone says free speech. This is how crazy I think it is out there. I don't think people even realize what we're saying when you say free speech. You're like, they think, hate speech is the new thing, right? Yeah. They think you can't say things, that are mean to people, and you can't hate on people and stuff like that, which you can. Yeah. But what it really is coming down to is like, no, it's actually controlling your mind. It's you want to have a free mind, and you can't have a free mind if you can't have free words and free thoughts and free dialogue and all that. Yeah. So if they get rid of X, to your point, which they are absolutely trying to go after, like actively
3 or 4 countries are suing them.
Other countries, which is the crazy thing. Right. It's not just like some billionaire like Bill Gates or someone on the left trying to go after Elon's company. Like, no, this is
Australia,
this
Brazil,
is a global thing. They're trying to take that thing down. Yeah. And it's for control of not just our words, but our mind. Right. And it doesn't matter what you think. If you're like, oh, cool, yeah, I want guys like whoever canceled because I don't like them, I think differently than them. Dude, no, that's maybe where it's starting. Yeah. That's the most obvious places you can see it. This is coming everywhere. Yeah. Before you know it, because imagine if they get X. Yeah. Imagine if Harris wins. Imagine a couple of years down the road, if the stuff that's happening in UK comes over here in terms of censorship and jailing people for talking. Yeah. Like, you won't be able to trust anything. Everything will essentially be propaganda, censored, approved, and just like approved post, approved headlines, approve everything. Yeah. And then at that point, well, what's the fucking point?
Yeah. I mean, it's, you see it so much when you deal with different people. There are different reality, like information silos that they're in. If they're, on one platform and not on another one, or whatever.
Yeah.
On like Redditor is like, it's like talking to an alien.
Right.
It's a different thing. And because they're getting a different flow of information.
Yeah.
And what they want is for the flow to all be the same. And, at least, those are people are getting one kind of information, like that's ridiculous, like that you even think that that's real. And then, we are getting different stuff and you have to sift through it. But, this thing about him, like misinformation and disinformation, it's basically a government official. They get proven wrong if there's this track record that they get proven wrong.
Yeah.
That's not happening. Oh, it is happening. And this keeps happening with everything. Right. But they would stop it at that's not happening. And they would go no further. And basically that's just people in the government like saying, hey, we messed up, but we don't want you to know about it. Like, anyone else in their real job, you just get fired.
Yeah.
But they're like, that's disinformation. Oh, that must be nice to be like, oh, I made a mistake and that's disinformation. Totally. And that's basically what they're doing. Like, so they basically will not be able to make mistakes anymore because the mistakes will be disinformation.
Well, yeah. Well, it's good to know that the government never makes mistakes. So
yeah. I mean, how comforting is that? And people are very comforted by that. Yeah. I mean, like, I think that's a lot of the pushback against really believing any of this conversation that we're having is that's really stressful. Like to be in a situation where like, okay, well, I'm being lied to by a lot of people. And, it's much more comforting to be like, they want for what's best for us.
Oh, for sure.
That would be great.
Well, that's going to end up.
We live under benevolent rule. Yeah. That is fantastic.
Well, that's all well and good until you go out and you get in your car and your car won't start now because your social credit score is too low because you said some shit on the internet.
Yeah.
And like, that's a funny thing to say out loud here in America, but that's happening in China. That's happening in fucking Australia. That like you can't use you can't use public transportation because your social credit score is too low because you said something against Xi Jinping, and it's like that's gonna happen. Like that's coming. Yeah. Like,
and when you think about like which book is this in? You talk about the government has a monopoly on violence.
Yeah.
Right. And if someone's like, well, what do you mean? Well, if you think about it, like the government is the only one, whether it's the police, the military, CIA, whatever, that does kill people. And that's just what they do. Yeah. Anyone else that even assaults somebody goes to prison. Yeah. But they're just like, nope, that person needs to die. And they do it.
Yeah. They don't even call it violence. It's just what the government does.
Yeah. That's just what they do. Yeah. So that's a great point that you made, that like when someone's like, no, I have to believe that the government is, acting in my best interest because they can tax me out of my home. They can kill me. They can take my kids. Yeah. They can do literally whatever they want. I'm powerless to them. They have a monopoly on me, essentially. Right. They better have my best interest at heart. When they start to hear that they don't, I think a lot of people struggle with that. And RFK is doing a great job, like showing. I just posted a thing on my story last night where he was talking about the military industrial complex forever has done crazy shit. Killing people, overthrowing other countries, proposing ideas to his uncle JFK about taking down an airliner to start a war and like do all that. Like, and when they hear that, they're like, conspiracy. Alex Jones, not real, but that is the truth. That is real. Yeah. That is what we are fighting against. And if we want more of that, which is real, which is the truth, okay, cool. Then vote for more government and just close your eyes, put your head in the sand, and just hope that they don't actually turn on you in particular. But that's what the government is. That's what they do. It's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, when they, whatever, absolute power corrupts absolutely. They have enough power. If you can do it and get away with it, like, well, why not? This benefits them. Like they've just kind of lost a moral compass with that. And I think that probably comes from Violence is Golden, which was originally. Actually, that was the beginning of The Way of Man, and I pulled it out and just made a standalone essay. Okay. Because really, I think if you can't understand that violence underpins all laws, I feel like you're still sitting at the kiddie table, and I feel like you have to understand that to understand masculinity. You have to understand that, like, that it's the fundamental piece that you have to get before you can really understand masculinity and what it comes from. Like, okay, well, like, all of this is violence.
Explain that to everyone.
Okay. So basically the idea is that it's so simple, but if you make a law who at some chain, any law, any attacks, any simple law like a zoning law, like somewhere down the chain, it is enforced by violence. Because people have this fantasy, like they'll come and take someone to jail, like that's a peaceful process. Why do they go to jail? They go to jail because men with guns are standing there. They're going to kill them if they don't go to jail. And that's the only reason why anyone goes to jail. No one wants to go to jail. They're not like, you got me. Yeah. I'll go to jail. All right. Right. No, people go to jail because you're going to kill them if they don't. And that is all laws. That is why people pay the IRS. That is why people pay whatever they need to pay and do follow whatever rules that they need to follow, is because somewhere down the chain of consequences, there is violence. And that is how all human societies work. And it like down from caveman on up. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand life. And you don't, and then therefore you can't understand masculinity or anything else. But you need to understand that like this is how men come into a space. How do they? This is why like a lot of special forces guys or whatever like the way of men. It's like, how do you take over a space? You go into an area and you create a perimeter, and that protect that perimeter. What is that perimeter protected by? Violence. And then you extend. Like that's how you.
How do we get resources? Violence.
But that's how it works. And we live so far from the edge of the perimeter, like most people do, that they are able to forget that. Yeah. And that's why they have foolish ideas. Like if you understood that, then you understand life and you understand the dangers of the kind of stuff we're talking about. Well, if you give those people with all the guns an absolute power, they have it to use against you, and you don't have any power to use against them. And that's why it's concerning. But if you just think they're going to be nice, then that's not.
It's like the easiest argument for the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Do you want to give your only defense mechanism to the people you need defense from?
Well, here's the problem with the Second Amendment, and this was I wanted to bring this up anyways because you said that you brought up the violence thing. The problem with the Second Amendment as it is right now, we already gave it away. It's a shell of a fucking it's a shell of what it was supposed to be, because the Second Amendment states that I can have the same weaponry the government has. So why am I not allowed to own a warship? And I asked that to people. They're like, well, what do you need a warship for? And I'm like, because the fucking government has one. So if according to the Second Amendment, I should be able to have a nuclear weapon.
Right.
Why can I not have a nuclear weapon?
Right.
Well, that's not. No, fuck you. As soon as we said, but not those weapons, we gave it away.
Yeah.
Like it's a fucking joke now.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you can have your little AR-15. Your fucking AR-15 doesn't matter if we have a weaponized drone dog that you're not allowed to own.
Yeah.
Because you're a private citizen.
Yeah.
So
you have to get a license to operate the drone.
I think the whole Second Amendment thing is like these dudes fucking, grabbing their dicks about, I need my AR-15. It's like, yeah, me too, but I want 7,000 AR-15s and a warship and a fucking tank and a nuke. And like, if you really wanted to protect yourself from the government, we would have to have the same weaponry that the government has.
Yeah.
Because right now, like if the government really wanted to roll through and take your guns, they would.
Yeah.
And they totally could because they have bigger guns.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of guys live in a kind of Clint Eastwood fantasy world about what they're going to do with guns and what that actually means. Fortunately, like the first really gun training classes that I ever had, really made me like really hesitant to ever use one, in the sense of like, if you understand the legal ramifications of anything that you would do and how that would go to court.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was reading a book, I think it has violence in the title, recently, but and he actually played some of it for me, and it reiterated the concerns that I have, and but made a point that like all these guys who are posting all these comments, these kind of jerk off comments about like, well, if someone came to my house, I would shoot them, and like this is what I would do. Like, you actually just stated an intent, and that's going to be used in your legal case. Like you've now expressed online that you fantasized about killing people coming to your house. Like so that you were actually just waiting for hoping to kill somebody.
Anything you say can and will be used against you.
And that's kind of, I've been aware of that kind of stuff for a long time because I had a pretty good instructor, like a former Green Beret, who taught me early handgun stuff. And he was really big on what the law is actually says you can do. And like, well, the law is actually not probably on your side most of the time. And definitely not in a city with a Soros DA. So like, there's places like, there are pockets of Texas where you probably get away with some shit, and maybe some Florida, maybe some, after a hurricane or something like that, there could do some things.
Drag the body into your house. And make sure you plug a few in their front too after you shot them in the back.
Yeah. I mean, but that'll go in your case. Was
that good job?
Good.
No,
it's. I mean, you just have to be aware of all that stuff. And there's so many guys who just live in this fantasy land that they're going to do all these things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're going to jail. Like I wrote an essay called Violence is Golden. I'm going to jail. The DA comes across the DA's desk. I'm going to jail.
Mr. Donovan.
Real jail.
Yeah, like for a while.
Yeah.
Mr. Donovan, we finally caught up.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I have to go to a jiu-jitsu gym and roll with so many cops.
Yeah. Need some buddies.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'd like to ask you a couple other things here.
Cool.
At the end of your book, Fire in the Dark, I was on 75 hard and I was reading it outside at night while I was walking with a weight vest on in an empty college parking lot under the lights. Like that's how committed I was to finishing this book. I was like, it's getting late. I had to do my second workout. I don't want to put this down. I'm taking it with me. And I ran over to the college so I could read it under the light, and I'm reading it. I just tried to bring it up right now, but I couldn't bring it up. Maybe you remember. Dude, the last couple pages and then into the last paragraph, I finished that book. Now imagine this. It's probably like 10 p.m. at night in Phoenix, in an empty college parking lot with just the street lights on. No one around. It's during COVID. They actually were kicking me out of the freaking parking lot all the time because that was supposedly a hazard. It was insane. But anyways, I'm finishing that last page and I get done and I close the book and I'm not kidding you. I literally shut the book and it's like, fuck yes. I was so fired up from reading the end of that book that I wish that like maybe one of those drones had been around or someone had seen that. Like imagine this guy with a weight vest on in the parking lot at 10 p.m. Yes, from a book. And there's nobody around. He's not talking to anybody. That book, dude, really did light a fire in me.
Awesome.
If you tell us about Fire in the Dark, if you would, and because you talk about solar idealism,
right,
which is like your thing, but yeah, Fire in the Dark. Like, do you remember how that ended?
I mean, not word for word.
Yeah, not word for word.
Somebody asked me this morning. I had somebody, one of the guys who's actually in the Order of Fire, asked me. He's like, remember this time when you said this one thing? And like, he had written it down in his gym notebook at the time. Man, I'm like. I've been on a lot of podcasts and on a lot of like I don't know the exact context of what I was saying,
but in general,
but in general, but no, I mean, basically, I mean, I can give the concept of Fire in the Dark, and what I was doing with Fire in the Dark is really taking masculinity and looking at it from a mythological perspective, from this what I call the high seat, like you're in a place, we're in this weird place in history, we have access to information that nobody's ever had before.
Right.
So, you can look at all these different cultures and see how they evolved into this evolved into that, this evolved into that, this evolved into that. And you can see the through lines and the themes. And so, hey, let's look at these themes and from where we are right now and make decisions about what's good for us right now. Because that's actually what everybody did in history. They're not like, oh, well, how can I copy the past? They're like, well, what are we doing? Okay, what system do we need?
Right.
And they're developing things in real time. And based on the information that we have, I mean, you can go back to Epic of Gilgamesh. It's like the oldest story in the world and be like, oh, well, they were talking about some of the same things, that we were talking about. What can you pull from that and use now and compile it into like a system? And so Fire in the Dark is really that system. And it's the idea, it really comes from the Way of Men, this idea of the perimeter. And I use the metaphor of fire.
Yeah.
To talk about what does fire do? Well, it kind of does what the sun does, in the sense of it creates light and warmth for everybody around it. And it's such a visceral, like visual thing, because everyone has started a campfire and you can see where the light ends. And beyond that is mystery and chaos. Right. And so it's very accessible for literally everyone on the planet. Like if you've had a fire, you know that there's a circle, and after that circle, that is the perimeter of your control and also your understanding, because beyond that, you can't see very well at night, and so like what's up close to the fire, you can understand and you can see. And that is, so it's not just control in terms of violence and whatever, but it's also like, hey, this is everything I care about. These are all my values. This is the people around me. This is all the people around the fire, the people I care about right now. This is where we speak the same language. We agree that this rock is called a rock. All these things are at this point. And it represents very much kind of what the sun does. Like the sun pulls things into its orbit. It's a kind of a crazy circle if you actually look at how it actually works. Mm-hmm. But the way we're taught in grade school, it's just like concentric circles around each other is where the planets are, right? But it's you look at that, and what the sun is really doing is providing everything around it with kind of light and warmth and allowing it to flourish. And that's a great metaphor for, I think, who you want to be as a man or a leader. You want to be a guy who, like, if you're a CEO of a company, okay, well, all these people are depending on me for their income, and I'm like making their lives better, hopefully. Or you're a black hole that sucks everybody in and just sucks them dry. And we've all met both kinds of people. Yep. And so, like, if you want to be the kind of guy that like everyone kind of gravitates towards, and he brings order to the world around him and makes their lives better. And so that's kind of the defining metaphor of Fire in the Dark and solar idealism. And so I just kind of started building a philosophy out from there with, archetypes, Father, Striker, Lord of the Earth, things that we've always had in every system over and over and again, which really, to me, because I don't really take a supernatural perspective on things. I'm actually a pretty practical guy. And so I'm looking at this. I see it as the way that men have idealized versions of themselves. Like the warriors, there's always a thundering warrior god, always, that's represents that part of what being a man is. That's all the way of men stuff. That's all the virtues that come with that. And then there's kind of the higher thinker version, which is the father the king version that has to like organize everything and do a lot of the intellectual organization that has to happen and differentiate things. And then, most of what we do in life is actually just keeping things going. Like really, that's 90% of life is busy work, that just things that need to be done, or relationships that need to be maintained, and all these things. And so that's dealing with the natural world. And so that's basically the concept of Fire in the Dark. And I think probably what you're referring to at the end of the book, I get what we've started calling them, and I'm actually thinking about this a lot this weekend. I might even write something about it. Is we've started calling them holy positives, like things, what has always been true. What are things that I think men, and that's what I was doing with The Way of Men, like what has masculinity always been, always and everywhere. With the majority, you can always do like there was this one little guy who thought something different, but like as the mainstream of society, of all these societies, where have they been with certain things, what would they recognize as masculinity? And doing the same thing, like with ideas about truth and virtue. And that's kind of how Fire in the Dark ends, I think, is talking about, well, what has always been true? Because we're fed all this nonsense, about it, and a lot of it comes from Marxism. It's like, let's say down is up and up is down, and like, what if, and a lot of it comes from marketing too. Like everybody wants to be, contrarian marketing works, but it says ridiculous things to make you think and like make you open the email. Like we all know it, we've all done it, but it's what works. But it creates this world of like vulnerability is strength, and like things that are okay. Those are antonyms. Like that's not true. And so, but if you take out all that bullshit like what would everybody agree with? And it's better to be strong than it is to be weak, almost always. You like you don't have to be the strongest, whatever, but it's better to be strong than it is to be weak. It's better to be healthy than it is to be sick. Could all humans agree on that? Like for all of human history? Yes, that sounds reasonable. Is it better to be beautiful than it is to be ugly? And is beauty good? Yeah, everybody thinks that. That's a normal thing to believe. Are men and women different? Yes. Everyone has believed that for all of human history. And side note, I mentioned the blank slate. In the blank slate, there's something referenced called a list of human universals. And I've read the book recently, actually. Because I was worried it was one of those that they just like delete off the internet. But there's a guy named Donald Brown who made a list of things that all studied human societies have in common, like beliefs that they share, like what always happens, like all the societies that anthropologists have studied over the years, what do they have in common? And there's a nice tidy little list, and I think it's a great way to start of like, how can we construct a human reality? Like rather than creating systems that are like, well, what if we did this crazy thing that no one's ever done? Which is a lot of what the 20th century has been.
Sure.
Why don't we go back to like, hey, not go back to the past, but look at everything we know about all these other groups. How do humans reliably behave? And create a society based on that. And those are the simple things. I think that's where we can start to find common ground and say things that most guys would agree with. Like if I say, it's better to be courageous than it is to be a coward. I think we will. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Let's go with that. And that's not that hard. That's very simple. It should be common sense. And I think it was common sense for most of our ancestors all around the world throughout history. So let's go to that place. And a test of this, which is, this is what I might write about. And I've been talking to my guys about this this week, is that a test of this is, could you agree that something is good even if you would never represent that quality or be able to do that thing? Because if you want to start making cope or resentment, jealousy, and redefining things around things to make yourself feel better.
Yeah.
That's where you lose the truth. Like if some people are just ugly, man, like they just got hit with the ugly stick, and they're just always you can make yourself better looking, but you just didn't get that card. Yeah. If you can know that you're ugly and say that it's better to be beautiful, that's some self-awareness. And the same thing, like, if you could never, my dad, this is terrible, but funny. But my dad had polio. He was one of the last people to get it, basically, and his twin brother didn't. So he had the leg braces and the Easter seals, whatever. And he's joked about this, and none of us will say it because it's horrible. We'll all cry. But at his funeral, he said he wanted someone to say, well, now my dad can finally run. Which is horrible, but here's a guy who's never been able to run, but he knows that it's good to run.
Yeah.
And there are so many things in society that are like that. But we've made like fat positivity or whatever, things like let's imagine that being something that is obviously unhealthy and like almost all problems are downstream from.
Right.
Like obesity is just one of these problems that creates other problems. And let's pretend that that's not real because it hurts people's feelings and create this big coping mechanism for it. And the same is true of like men and women aren't different. Let's create a whole bunch of lies about how they're the same, because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Mm-hmm. Just these simple things that are true. And there's always exceptions to every rule. But what is the general rule? What's the rule of thumb? What is the best practice? And if you can go back to that point and not start making excuses for the things you don't like, and a tricky one that we came up in our group, and I have been down this road myself, I was asking the guys for new ones. I'm like, what are some new holy positives? What was always good? And wealth came up, and people get really emotional about that. It's actually always better to have money.
Yeah.
But if you've resigned yourself that I'm never going to have money, then you make all these stories about like how money's bad. But in reality, I think it's always better to have money.
Totally. You have more options.
I mean, but a lot of people, I've been in the mindset in my life where like when I was driving delivery trucks and stuff like that, I was like, I'm never going to own a house. Like I've just, okay, I've made that choice that's where we're going to be.
It's for the others.
Yeah. And so like, and that's another way that'll catch a lot of guys off guard because they'll believe all the strength is better and the courage and whatever. Right. But like, is it always better to have more money? Well, yeah, it actually is.
So funny. They released a meta-analysis of all these studies. And they actually studied that, which is hilarious. And they're like, well, actually, we were wrong, because they say like, oh no, after $70,000, everybody's the same amount of, and it's like, well, actually, the more money you have, the happier you are. Like, no shit.
Period.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm not great at I'm terrible at making money, but like, we
talked about that.
I try to get better. Yeah, I'm not the best. But I try to get better, but I'm not that great. But I tried to frame it to someone just to make the point, and knowing that I'm not that great at it either. I'm not like saying like, oh, well, I'm really good at it and you're a moron. It's more like, think of how vulnerable you are, like from a tactical perspective. Like it's easy to take you out. Yeah. like just financially, knock a leg out of the chair and you're screwed.
Well, you said it earlier too, when we were talking about preparing for violence with guns and supplies and trucks and all dogs and all this stuff. Like, well, no, it's more of the slow burn where they're going to take the job away, increase taxes, make it harder to afford your mortgage. And that's where most people are going to go down. So like you said, like if you just have a shitload of money in the bank, like that, it doesn't really matter as much who the president is, because you have a lot more options. Yeah. You can do a lot more stuff. Yeah. Dude, one thing you said, I love how you said this, and I hope you do write about it, because I've been just noticing in general, in person, and especially as I look at social media, what's going on right now, I feel like we do need to get back to talking about the basics and common sense and like what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what has always been true. Because it seems like there's so many people that are just oblivious to, no, for all of human history, this was true, this was good, this was bad. Yeah. Only now in the past couple of years, this weird thing that you're talking about and screaming about is a new thing. And you're so adamant about it. You're trying to change people's minds who know throughout history that has not been the case. And I feel like that's because there's not a lot of talking about just basic things anymore, especially when it comes to masculinity and these hot button things, gender and free speech and the First and Second Amendment, what they really mean and all this kind of stuff. And one funny thing I've noticed is, what's trending on TikTok right now? People like discovering is a new amazing thing. Mad Dog 2020. I just found this.
Wait till they find about Boone's Farm.
Yeah. Holy shit. Strawberry field.
Because they call it MD 2020. Yeah. And it's just like, oh no, we've already gone through that. Yeah. It's not a good thing. We let that sail into the sunset, and now it's back, and they think it's like some new amazing thing. And I'm like,
just wait till you put caffeine in it and call it Four Loko.
Yeah. But and the cycle renews. Yeah. The Ouroboros turns.
The world is healing.
Yeah. But seeing that kind of solidified my point. It's just like, well, shit. No wonder there's so many, especially young people, that are so lost about what is real, what is true, what has always happened, what actually happened in these wars and all these different societies and of men and women and culture and all this stuff. Like, they're not learning that stuff. And that's why they're getting these crazy so-called, I'll call it crazy ideas about a lot of things and just planting their flag. And I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, the problem too is that these kids, right? The research that they're doing, I'm going to air quotes if you're listening to this, is on the internet. And the internet is a curated list of approved things that you're allowed to read as a fucking citizen of America or Brazil or Australia or wherever. Because the internet is different in China, and the internet is different in Japan, and the internet is different in fucking Norway. And it is a curated list of approved stuff from the fucking Google overlords. Because doing research in a library, and Jack, I'm sure you're going to attest to this too, doing research in a library in a book that was written pre-fucking Edward Bernays propaganda era and reading something on the internet are two completely different fucking things. I don't even consider internet research. I think that's what did you call it? An anachronism. A fucking, like, they're against each other. Like, the internet is not research. It's fake.
Yeah.
It's like the internet is totally fake. So how could you do research on it? You know?
Yeah. I mean, you can certainly find things that, like you find the same stuff. But,
Sure.
I mean, although when they change the books from the past, that's what's really creepy.
That's
why I said, that's why I bought
Yep.
a hard copy of that Human Universals book. Cause I'm like, that's thought crime. And I want to keep a copy of that.
That's why I always look for first editions of books. When I buy a book too, I want the first edition because I have a couple of examples in my home library of first edition and fifth edition of a book, and they're way different. Yeah. And it's like, wow, they changed all kinds of shit. Like they went, like this whole this whole chapter's gone.
Yeah.
Like this is not, wait, what the fuck is this stuff? Like, what are they talking about here? Like,
yeah, I just changed some stuff now, but it's such a hassle.
What edition is this?
I could do without the recommendations in the front. But yeah, I've done a little bit of that. When I did the hardcover, I actually did notes.
Those.
Yeah, I did notes. Well, because there was stuff that I didn't realize, or like that I could edit and add stuff. I didn't realize I had taken a line from somebody, and it came out like 4 years after the book was out. I was like, cause you just absorb stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, I got that. Okay. I did get that from somebody. Okay. I'll cite it. I didn't mean to not,
Totally.
Yeah. So Jack, you have a group called the Order of Fire.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you, people listening to this, I think they're going to see your wisdom, and you have a lot more, and there's a lot of books they need to read and everything. Right. So what is the Order of Fire? Like, he's been in it for a bit. Mm-hmm. But because I was also going to ask, do you speak, or where can people go find you? But I'm assuming Order of Fire is probably a pretty good spot.
Yeah. Order of Fire is it took me a while to figure out how to articulate it. For people, because we started out with an idea, and right now where I'm at, because it's entering its third year now. Yeah. So I mean, it's a small group, but it's guys who are really plugged into the solar idealism principle, and they want to move forward with it. And so I think of it as, imagine the Freemasons in year 3.
That's a good way to put it.
And that's kind of where, and I'm like, now I've said that, and we have a couple of Freemasons in the group, and they're like, yeah, that's exactly what we, because it's not a religion, but we have rituals. It's more of a philosophy, and it's a men's group, and we want to improve each other, but it's not a self-improvement group. There's all those components. So it's very similar. It's like a men's fraternal organization. I don't like to say brotherhood, because then sometimes that can get cheap. Yeah. Oh, you're my brother because you pay X dollars a month. Not really. It is a fraternal organization for men who are interested in solar idealism, and it kind of helps support what I do. Now, we do a live show every week where me and my buddy, who's an electrician who knows more about Homer than anyone I've ever met. We're doing the Odyssey right now. We're doing a read through on that. And he's just like, well, here's what's really interesting about the Greek word. And he'll go super deep dive on all this stuff. Cool. And so we've been doing that. And then we do have events where we do what I have, the fire ritual, which is basically the concept I talked about from Fire in the Dark. Because I feel like a lot of men are in a position where they need a center. What's my point of orientation in the universe? Mm-hmm. And that ritual is actually about creating it. So, I mean, you see all kinds of weird rituals and stuff that people do online and whatever. And I do colorful things. But there's all these people doing crying things and whatever that are kind of terrible, and therapy rituals and stuff. But ours is just about creating that center and that source of identity and orientation in the universe. And so that's really all that we're doing it about. And then it's also, we always try and do some physical stuff. Like I went through one of our old events the other day. I'm like, we did a lot in that one. We did jiu-jitsu. We did we had a knife defense seminar. We all worked out together in the gym. We did a lot of stuff. But I think whenever you get together with men, you have to have some kind of physical component.
Yeah.
Because that's how they get to know each other in a better way. You know? And so it's just really more positive than that. So that's the group, and it's just kind of been open for people to apply to join it. Obviously, it's people have to read. It's a big buy-in because people have to read Fire in the Dark first. Because I'm like, you have to understand what I'm doing.
Yeah,
you're like, otherwise, if you don't understand what I'm doing, how could you participate in this?
Yeah.
You know, and then and we're certain kind of guys like they like guys who are actually really interested in mythology, but not all of them. We got some gun guys, and it's really cool. It's really, really positive. We have about 2/3 of the guys are our fathers.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a really active fatherhood thing that I'm not even involved in. I mean, they have this fatherhood stuff where they're posting about their challenges with that and whatever every day, and kind of sharing information.
Yeah.
I was joking last year, I think all of the guys in Australia had pregnant wives or girlfriends. And so I'm like, I can't believe I host this forum with so much talk about midwives. Like, like this is amazing. I mean, it's great, but like,
never thought my life was going to depend.
Yeah, I'm like, did not see that coming. Right. I also did not see like a lot of them being into Warhammer 40K. But that was a big segment, so you just get, what they're into. And a bunch of them they're into firearms, and like, there's just, I kind of make it, I change it based on what they need. Yeah. Because we want to make it fun. But it's also, like I said, I think Freemasons Year 3 is a really good way to describe it. It's my version of like, well, because that's kind of run its course, I think, to a certain extent. But it's a fascinating thing that's been around for a really long time.
Yeah. And
obviously provided a lot of value for a long time. And I'm like, that seems like a cool project.
That is super cool.
Yeah.
It's cool what you said about, guys opening up to each other after they get physical or like do something like that.
Yeah.
We just had a men's retreat, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if you call it a retreat or men's development camp, whatever we call it, right? Up in Sedona recently. And we did an impromptu like wrestling session in front of the river.
Yeah.
And we didn't plan it. It was just one of those things where, some of us started wrestling around, throwing each other in the dirt and stuff.
Right.
And I noticed after we did that, and this was like the second or third day, then everyone kind of like was way more open with each other and was able to like, it's like very visceral thing, and so it was cool. It was cool little callback there. So.
It's so old school.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like to do that. That is Plato's Academy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where all this stuff comes from. That's where philosophy comes from. It's like dudes wrestling, and then in between breaks, talking about life and philosophy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it works. That's really normal. And we do it all the time in jiu-jitsu too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like on Sundays, I'll go in for a mat. I might have 3 or 4 rolls. But I've probably been talking for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Like we're just, and it's guys talking about whatever they want to talk about. Sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's definitely not.
Yeah.
But it's just things that come up. And that's something that happens, I think, more now in the world than it was happening 50 years ago. I mean, because we can talk about all these negative things that are happening with masculinity, and they're all true. But it is a weird thing as far as like martial arts and things like that.
Yeah.
50 years ago, like 40 years ago, whatever, men stopped playing sports after high school, and they just worked until they died or retired, right? And they got fat and they just drank beer and watched other people play sports.
Yep.
And that's what you did. And now, I mean, I'm 50 years old and I wrestle 20-year-olds all the time.
Yeah.
And so and I'm not the only one. I mean, that's a really popular thing all around the world, that these guys are going out and being physically active. And actually that's a place where they're sharing their knowledge with like younger guys. And there's a lot of positive activity that's happening around that. And like I said, there's also the philosophical conversations that are happening and whatever. So that is one thing that's positive that's happened in the world. And I think I always try to encourage people to do especially when single mothers, occasionally I'll get like a single mother who will read like The Way of Men trying to figure out what she should do, which is a really cool gesture.
Yeah.
Because that means she really cares.
Yep.
And she's not just trying to impose whatever.
Yeah.
And she actually wants to, okay, I have a man that I'm trying to create here. And what does it do? And I'm like, well, you can't do all of it. You need to have him around other men. And so he can just be socialized by like other men who know how to behave in. And that's the kind of environment where that could happen.
I've personally given your book to a couple of single moms of boys. And they're like, what do I do? Like, I kind of look to you as like this, whatever. I'm like, read this.
Yeah.
And then get them around other kids, other boys.
Yeah.
Like, and don't be mad at them when they throw each other in the dirt, and don't be, don't scold him for being a boy.
Yeah.
And I actually got into some trouble on the internet. Not too
No.
long ago. Yeah. Because I told
On the
on the internet. Yeah. Because I was on Tyler's podcast, and I told single moms, I was like, and he has a really big podcast, and I was like, don't try to be their dad too.
Yeah.
And I got all kinds of fucking hate. Like, people wanted to, like, these women in my DMs, I got like death threats and stuff. It was crazy. It's cool.
To your point, we could probably wrap it up on a great positive note here, because we've identified a lot of, like you said, true stuff about masculinity and culture and all this stuff. And there's a lot of shit to kind of worry about if you think about it.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of positivity out there. Like there's like you said, you have your group. We do a men's retreat every quarter. There's a lot. There's online stuff. There's in-person stuff. But if anyone out there is like listening and they're like, dude, I don't know, what do I do? Do I join it? I would say try to do something that does have something in person, especially where there's something physical, hiking, jujitsu, wrestling, like whatever, like get around other men. Like, I think that's the easiest way to kind of level up a bit. It's like, oh man, that guy's stronger than me. That guy's faster than me. That guy's more handsome, that whatever. And that's just part of like, you are going to be something most likely that is more than another guy. And I think that's how we can all just grow, and we get stronger, we get better. And that's what we need to do.
Yeah. And when I wrote The Way of Men, there were hardly any men's group. Now there's tons of them. There's tons of different. Yeah. You could join. I know guys, they'll join, one, and maybe the first one isn't the right one.
Sure.
And they'll just try another thing where they'll get tired of that one and they'll go to the next one. And that's fine. But the guys who can be awesome in their own heads at home aren't growing. So if getting out with those other guys and getting that illusion gone is very important. I bet I could beat up anyone.
Go to
test yourself.
No. Yeah.
It's an analogy we use it's called True North at our men's camp.
Yeah.
I say it all the time, whether we're training with firearms or knives or wrestling or cold water or whatever we're doing. Yeah. It's like we can train all day long and think in our heads that we're some macho guy or Rambo or whatever, but no, go test.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Line up.
Yeah.
See what you got.
Yeah.
And then so train and test, not just train and think. You got to actually put the body to use, put the mind to use. Absolutely. And see what you're actually capable of,
Yeah.
Well, dude, like no shit, you're my favorite author, and I really thank you for coming on here, spending time with us, and looking forward to whatever you write next, dude.
Awesome, man.
Appreciate you, Jack.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.